The best rivalry in sports makes its return this Saturday with the 126th edition of the Army-Navy game. Last year, it was the midshipmen dispatching of the Black Knights with a convincing 31-13 victory in the nation's capital. This year, the rivalry returns to Baltimore, Maryland for the first time in almost a decade. Now, the last meeting here was a historic one, as Army snapped a 14-game losing streak to the Mids back in 2016. Meanwhile, once again for the second straight year, the Commander-in-Chief's trophy will be on the line, as both sides were able to defeat Air Force earlier this season. Side note, if you did not get a chance to catch those games, I would highly recommend seeking out the highlights, as both were instant classics that came down to the wire. And with that out of the way, let's break this game down and take a look at the key players on both sides. We'll start with last year's winner and the defenders of the Commander-in-Chief's trophy and the Navy Midshipmen. The Mids are led by head coach Brian Newberry, who has his team on the verge of consecutive 10-win seasons for the first time in program history. Newberry's defensive game plan gave the Black Knights fits in last year's matchup. They did a fantastic job of stuffing the Army rushing attack and forcing them into obvious passing situations over and over again. This year, the goal for Newberry will be much of the same, as Army is even less of a threat throwing the ball down the field than they were a season ago. However, he will be relying a little bit on a younger defense this year, especially in the secondary, which leads us to our overview of the Mids defense, and as you can see, there are a lot of underclassmen starting in the secondary. In fact, none of these guys started in the game a year ago, so it would be of the utmost importance for Newberry to keep his guys disciplined on the back end so they don't get burned over the top, which Army is capable of doing. Meanwhile, Navy should feel quite confident in their front seven, which includes the likes of Luke Pierce and Landon Robinson, who are returning and looking to ruin the Black Knights' evening once again. Robinson is easily the best player on this Navy defense and has consistently had to fight off double teams all season long, yet he still leads the team in tackles for loss as well as sacks. Also, something of note is that inside linebacker, where the Mids have two first-year starters, including standout sophomore Mark Anthony Parker, who leads the team in tackles and has 6.5 tackles for loss during his breakout campaign. Last year, this Navy defense shined and held the Army rushing attack to just 3 yards per carry and 114 total rushing yards, and they did a fantastic job of stopping the Black Knights on the early downs and forcing Army to beat them on 3rd and 7+. And you can bet that that'll be a key part of their game plan on Saturday afternoon, but more on that in just a bit. Now let's switch over to the offensive side of the ball, and in my opinion, one of the most entertaining units in all of college football this season. Navy's offensive coordinator Drew Cronick has created one of the most diabolical recreations of the triple option, and has paired it with a personnel grouping that fits it almost to a T. It all starts with their big boys on the offensive line, and while they are young at the tackle spots, especially with right tackle Malcolm Johnson, who took over that starting spot back in late October, but it's their interior trio of Cam Nichols, Ben Purvis, and Hokie Smith that really stir the drink. Cronick loves to use his offensive linemen in all kinds of fun and unique ways, not just by pulling them for their power and option concepts, but also by using them in their misdirection game, which gave Army fits in this game a year ago. Moving on, next up we'll take a look at the stars of the skill positions, and it all starts with senior quarterback Blake Horvath. Horvath had an all-time performance in this game a year ago, where he rushed for over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. Whether it was with his arm or with his legs, he was continuously tormenting the Army defense throughout the game, and will be a main focus of the Mids attack on Saturday afternoon. Joining him in the backfield is the outstanding and lethal trio of Eli Heidenreich, Alex Teska, and Brandon Chapman. Outside of Horvath, Teska gets the second most carries on the team, and most of those come in between the tackles, where he does immense damage. As you can see here, as soon as the crease opens up, he's got a great first burst and can outrun defenders in the open field. Heidenreich and Chapman, meanwhile, are the do-it-all wingbacks, and they do a ton of their damage out on the edges as well as downfield through the air, which they both put on display in this game a year ago, as they were both able to haul in a receiving touchdown. Heidenreich is the more dangerous of the pair and should get a look in the NFL in my opinion. He's easily the best receiving threat on this Navy offense, and he put together a legendary performance in their matchup with Air Force earlier this season. In that matchup, he caught 8 passes for 243 yards to go along with 3 touchdowns in what was an instant classic of a game. So in all, this is a very talented team that has been clicking on all cylinders for a majority of the year, and that is why they are the favorites heading into Saturday afternoon. So with that, let's take a look at the keys to the game for the Mids to walk out with the win and retain control of the CIC. Now it all starts with key number 1, and that is getting the ship flowing early. If you've watched this Navy offense over the past 2 years, then you'll know that once they start to get the ball rolling, it becomes incredibly difficult for defenses to stop them. This is due to their incredibly unique offense and the way they're able to create movement one way while the ball goes another. Once they start to get defenses frustrated and second guessing their decisions, the big plays tend to come in bunches, and that was on display in their victory over the Knights 1 season ago. If they can replicate that this year and get the Army defense uncomfortable early, they could run away with it in the latter stages of the contest. Next up is key number 2, and that is forcing Army into obvious passing situations. This is also something they did a tremendous job at in last year's contest, and it'll be just as important this year as well. It's no secret that Army are not built to stretch the field vertically. The Knights' game plan will likely be to control the game and the ball with their power rushing attack. If the Mids defense is able to get stops on early downs and force Army into 3rd and 7+ on a consistent basis, like they were able to do a season ago, it'll be a massive improvement on their chances to not only walk away with the win, but to also potentially make it a blowout in the latter stages of the contest. Plus, it should simplify things for their younger secondary, who would be more likely to get burnt over the top in a short yardage situation where they could get lost looking into the backfield. And finally, key number 3 is control the game on special teams. Again, another area where they were dominant in last year's matchup, and if the formula ain't broke, don't fix it, right? They did a fantastic job of pinning Army inside their own 20 and forcing them to drive the length of the field. Plus, after Army was able to make it a 1-score game to start the second half, the Navy kick return unit would give their offense a short field with a 42-yard return. It's those small little things that add up over the course of the game, and Navy saw the fruits of that last December. So if they are able to succeed in these 3 key areas once again, they should sing second after the final whistle. Now let's flip over to the Black Knights from West Point, who were led by one of the best head coaches in Army history, and Jeff Monken. Now there's no denying that it has been a tough year for the boys from West Point. However, they have shown great resiliency throughout the season, fighting back from a rough start that included a loss to FCS opponent Tarleton State. However, since that 1-3 start, the Knights have gone 5-2 over their last 7 games. If you'll remember, last year Monken's defense found themselves chasing ghosts against this Navy offense, and their tackling in that game was downright horrific at times, especially in the secondary. And that leads us to our overview of the Army defense, and we start in that secondary that returns just 2 of 4 starters from a season ago. Now this is a unit that has been fairly good throughout the year, ranking inside the top 50 in passing yards allowed per game. And much like their counterparts on the other side, they've had some struggles forcing turnovers throughout the year. Now they are going to play a key role in a potential Army victory, but I'll have more on that in just a few moments. Moving on to the front 7, and this is an area where Army should feel a little bit of confidence, considering this is a veteran-laden unit that is returning multiple starters from last year's game. But if you remember, they did not exactly have the best of performances in that matchup last December, so they should be fired up and ready to come and get some get back on the Navy offense that for the most part had their way with the Army defense. Flipping over to the offensive side of the ball, where the Knights have taken a bit of a step back. However, this unit has been incredibly resilient throughout the year and are a major reason why this team is heading to a bowl game. Obviously, it all starts with the big boys on the offensive line, where Army returns just 2 starters from a year ago. but this is a veteran-laden unit with all 5 of their starters being upperclassmen, and that includes center Brady Small, who has been a starter since his freshman year, and the anchor of their offensive line ever since. For the Knights to really have a chance to pull this upset, they need this group to open up some holes and take the pressure off of their quarterback. Much like with their defensive front 7, the Army offensive line had some major struggles in this game a year ago, so they should come out with a fire lit under them, looking to do some damage early. Moving on to the skill positions, and again, it all starts with Army quarterback Cale Helms. Now, the Knights originally came into the season with Dwayne Coleman pegged as their starter, but they have settled on Helms as the better option of the two since their 1-3 start. And obviously, it has been a good decision as they have gone on to have more offensive success with Helms leading the offense. He is a tough and hard-nosed runner that does a great job of fighting for extra yardage while not turning the ball over with great regularity. And joining him in the backfield is the trio of Noah Short, Hayden Reed, and Carson Smith. Short is undoubtedly the most explosive player on this Army offense and a guy that they need to get involved as much as possible. Despite being second on the team in carries and first on the team in receptions, he has somehow only reached the end zone twice all season. He needs to be a focal point of the Black Knights offense on Saturday if they are going to come out with the win. It'll also be incredibly important for Army to try to get Carson Smith or Jake Rendina going as well, as much like Helms, they do a lot of their damage in between the tackles, and that is an area where the Knights really need to have success if they are going to walk away with the win. Overall, this is a roster that is full of upperclassmen and extremely well coached. It's also important to remember that they have been a defense-first team during the resurgent final 2/3 of their season, so they need to avoid this becoming a high-scoring game, and that leads us to the keys to the game for the Army Black Knights. And it all starts with key number 1, make the game a dogfight. This is something that is ingrained into the DNA of every Jeff Monken coach team that I can remember. If Army can drag the mids into a defensive slugfest where they can control the game inside the hash marks, they have a really good chance of pulling the upset on Saturday afternoon. But they really need to keep this a low-scoring affair, as Navy obviously has the upper hand if the game were to turn into a track meet. Next up, key number 2 is finish your damn tackles. Last year, Army fans had to be pulling their hair out after watching some of the missed tackles that led to big plays by the mids offense. Look no further than this touchdown pass from Horvath to Heidenreich. As you can see, it is a one-on-one situation on the outside, where as the defender, you have to find a way to win even if you commit a penalty in the process. You cannot miss that tackle and allow Heidenreich to walk into the end zone. There was also this play early on in the game, which I felt really encapsulated a lot of Army's problems last year. Even when they had a numbers advantage, they still struggled to make the tackle, and as you can see, it leads to a big play and the drive continuing on. This is an area where Army really needs to flip the script and have a better performance in this year's game. If they cannot tackle, they cannot win this game. It is really that simple. And finally, key number 3 is win the game-changing plays. Every year in this game, there are those big moments where a key fumble or a fake on special teams always sways the pendulum one way or the other. For Army, they have to find a way to generate a couple of those plays throughout the game, whether it be forcing a turnover, scoring on special teams, or busting a big play late in the game on offense. It doesn't really matter how they do it, they just need to find a way to make a couple of those game-changing plays happen in order to pull the upset and sing second on Saturday evening. So with all of that out of the way, my prediction for the 126th edition of the Army-Navy game is that Navy will sing second after a 23-13 victory. I believe that the mids will be able to find enough explosive plays on offense, while also keeping Army from dominating in between the hash marks on defense. To me, Navy's biggest advantage in this game is their speed and quickness, and I see them being able to use that on both sides of the ball to keep the Knights at bay. We all know about Navy's explosiveness on offense, but to me, it'll be the quickness in their front 7 that'll be amongst the biggest talking points after the game. In that sense, it'll be fascinating to see how Army's offensive line deals with that speed, and we'll see if they can find a way to subdue it by consistently getting the push and opening up holes for their runners. To me, that is where this game will be won and lost, and I cannot wait to see how it unfolds this Saturday. So with that, thanks for watching, and let's hope for a fun, competitive, and clean game where everyone is able to walk out injury-free.